Você já imaginou ter na sua estante uma miniatura daquele carro que você gosta tanto de usar no seu jogo favorito? Ou então, quem sabe, uma miniatura de um carro nacional que marcou história para você, para o seu pai, para o seu avô? Te convido a conhecer então a loja do teu pai na Shopee, com dezenas de miniaturas para todos os bolsos e todos os gostos.
Forza Horizon 5 is a truly superb game. This racer packs an enormous amount of content into stunning open-world environments, spanning regions of Mexico and of course a Hot Wheels-inspired paradise in the sky. But it's had a more limited Xbox-only audience on consoles, until now. That's because porting powerhouse Panic Button has just delivered a version of the game for PS5 and PS5 Pro, even sporting ray tracing boosts for pro users. So is this the definitive Forza Horizon experience on console platforms? The overview of Forza Horizon 5 remains unchanged on PS5. There's a 60 FPS targeting performance mode and a 30 FPS targeting quality mode, with some substantial visual differences that we'll touch on later. Relative to the existing Xbox Series X version of the game though, we're looking at a similar visual experience. Flipping back and forth between Series X and PS5, there's virtually no visual distinction. Foliage placement is identical, the terrain is a match, and image quality is very similar. I'd really struggle to tell the difference between the two platforms in almost any circumstance. There are often divergences that you can chalk up to slightly different weather conditions or different accumulations of dirt or other debris, but I don't think these represent meaningful rendering differences. That error-free rendition of Forza Horizon 5 is actually a pretty great accomplishment, given that this engine has never run on PlayStation before. Pixel counts aren't especially important here, as both consoles typically reach and hold a full 4K in the shots I tested. I did notice more evidence of DRS on PS5 however, like in this shot which counts at about 1872p on PS5 and 2160p on Series X. I don't expect this would be at all noticeable in actual gameplay though. It's a pretty easy game to pixel count due to the fact that there's no TAA, and aliasing on specular and in alpha tested foliage is pretty obvious, though minimized somewhat by the very high resolution. Quality mode is up next, and again, the two modes across the consoles here are virtually indistinguishable. I struggled to find any kind of meaningful difference between the PS5 and Series X in typical play, with both machines delivering a basically identical rendition of the game. That's the typical outcome in current-gen titles nowadays, of course, between these two rather similar consoles. Across both machines, I got a flat 4K reading in my counts, suggesting a locked 2160p experience. We're looking at half the frame rate of the performance mode here, which seems to provide ample frame time room for a perfect pixel match on a 4K display. PS5 and Series X may be substantially similar then, but their quality and performance modes are very different. The quality mode packs a greater density of assets, stuffing a lot more foliage into every frame. Textures have more layers and often have high quality parallax occlusion maps to add additional detail. Pop-in tends to be less of a concern, as high detail versions of the game's assets stretch far into the distance. Mexico's sprawling views definitely look quite a bit better in quality mode, especially in the shrubby desert that typifies much of the game's landmass. Most console games rely primarily on resolution changes to optimize their performance in quality modes, but Forza depends on visual settings tweaks instead. Image quality across the two modes remains similar, though the trade-off in environment detail is pretty large. It might have been possible to retain the frame rate of the performance mode with more of that extended visual quality in the quality mode by using upsampling like FSR2 instead of the game's default 4x MSAA, though there are image quality trade-offs between these temporal techniques and MSAA in this game. In frame rate terms, both modes are essentially impeccable, offering a consistent 60 FPS and 30 FPS update in typical play. That's not too surprising, considering how well the game operates on the Xbox platforms, but it's still an impressive feat for how attractive the game is. Pre-rendered movies continue to run at 30 FPS in both modes, however. I did notice two small oddities though. The game's save size, even for a brand new save, is massive, clocking in at over 2 gigabytes. There's only one save per account, so this isn't that big of a deal, but it's a lot larger than any other save on my PS5 consoles. Series X saves in comparison are a lot smaller. The game's car physics also differ slightly depending on the mode. With zero controller input whatsoever, in this scene the car goes slightly further in quality mode. Likewise, in this shot, it may be linked to the difference in frame rate between the modes. This also appears to be the case on Xbox consoles, so it's not a new quirk on PS5 machines. PS5 Pro actually offers some pretty interesting enhancements over the base console, which are most compelling in the game's performance mode. There's a huge difference in the game's foliage. Note the denser and more vibrant greenery in these shots, with bushes and grasses and ferns that just aren't present on the base machine. Plus, further into the distance, the foliage that is rendered often shows a higher detail variant relative to the base console, with less visible pop-in. Of course, when you're barreling through races at speed, the advantage on Pro is less palpable, but the difference in density and pop-in is still obvious and highly appreciated. The PS5 performance mode is essentially a match in foliage rendering for the PS5 quality mode in my comparisons, with an equally lavish depiction of flora detail. That's a great development, given that was the big advantage the quality mode used to have over the performance mode. It's definitely not an exact settings match though. The game's very cool cone step mapping on building exteriors is a quality mode only feature, for instance. But in typical play, the two modes look quite similar. Beyond that change, the PS5 and Pro in their respective performance modes appear much the same. Resolution is pretty close as well, though Pro has the advantage here. In the shot where the base machine got pulled to 1872p, the Pro managed to hold a native 4K. It's not especially apparent in real-world gameplay in either case, but it does show that Sony's enhanced machine is pulling this off with frame time to spare. The quality mode on Pro is bound to be a little more controversial. In most respects, it's identical to its base PS5 counterpart, with similar-looking tweakables in my comparison shots. But there is one key point of differentiation: ray-traced vehicle self-reflections during gameplay. Essentially, the player vehicle can now feature reflections of itself, which are layered on top of the game's real-time cube map reflections. This is obvious on this vehicle, where the side mirror reflects on the car body along with the protrusions around the wheel and the spoiler. It's also clear on this buggy, where the chrome frame and lights reflect a warped version of the car around it. On this trailer, the effect is more subtle, but you can still see that the straps holding down the car are reflected along the metal sides of the chassis. Opposing cars don't seem to get this treatment though, only the player vehicle. The in-game garage and Forza Vista feature these reflections on PS5, but they aren't applied during gameplay. If you go looking for the effect, it is noticeable, I would say, even if it isn't especially visually impactful. Most of the game's reflections, though, are still based on other techniques. Their deficits aren't all that noticeable at the typical pace of play in Forza, so it's not like you're losing out on too much in the way of fidelity here. Still, I would have loved a more comprehensive RT reflection solution, perhaps like the one in Forza Motorsport, though that would probably be outside the scope of a port like this. Outside of that improvement, the PS5 and Pro here look essentially identical, matching in every significant respect in my testing. That includes resolution, as both machines seem locked to a full 4K pixel count. Frame rates on both modes are just as they were on PS5, which is to say that they reach their respective targets without drops. Expect a locked 30 FPS in quality mode, with the performance mode holding a steady 60. There is one curious issue on PS5 Pro though in the current patch. If you turn on the game's photo mode in quality mode on PS5 Pro during a race event, it crashes. I was able to replicate this behavior several times during multiple races, so I suspect this is an issue across the game. The Pro Performance mode doesn't bear this issue, nor does the base machine in either of its modes. Forza Horizon 5 is an excellent racer that is still one of the best looking racing games ever made. No racing game really comes close to the level of raw environmental fidelity that Forza Horizon 5 so effortlessly accomplishes across its vast open world. Plus, the car models look great, lighting quality is excellent, and performance is typically impeccable across its target platforms. Panic Button's porting effort certainly does the job too, though the base PS5 essentially comes in exactly as expected. Relative to Series X, it's a near perfect match. That's not a bad thing at all though, as the port is consistently high quality and arrives without significant issues. The Pro is really where the action is at, specifically in its performance mode. Getting quality mode foliage at performance mode frame rates is a huge bonus for Pro users, and provides a big visual boost over the base machine. It's likely the base console could have achieved something similar with a hit to resolution, but this is essentially a compromise-free experience that still typically runs at a full 4K. PS5 Pro's quality mode is less appealing, just because the added ray tracing makes a minimal difference in most gameplay. So Forza Horizon 5 is a great port on Sony's current-gen consoles. Hopefully we'll see more from this series soon, but for now this is a great way to enjoy this genre-defining title. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at digitalfoundry.net for exclusive and early access content and to get in touch use social media. Thanks for watching.
This is Forza Horizon 5 on the PlayStation 5. And this is Forza Horizon 5 on the Xbox Series X. And finally, this is Forza Horizon 5 on the PC. And today, we're gonna put them head to head to see what the differences are. In today's video, we're gonna take a look at the quality differences, the loading times, the weird things I spotted while playing and reviewing all of this footage, and some of the weird glitches and differences that I found. We're going to talk about all of that in today's video and a little bit more, so buckle in. Before we get too far into today's video though, I just want to set the stage and make sure everybody is on the same page. So let's talk about some PC specs first. I'm playing this off my gaming PC, which has a 4080 Super in it, a Ryzen 9 9950X with 64 gigs of RAM, and the game is installed on an SSD. The PC settings are on Ultra, but I've locked the FPS to 60 because that's actually the maximum that you can show on YouTube. And last but not least, PC has enhanced ray tracing turned on. But for those of you who don't know, ray tracing in Forza Horizon 5 is weird. You can refer to this chart here to see what ray tracing does depending on where you're driving or if you're in the garage, and what quality setting you're playing on. Since I'm on Ultra, it should be visible everywhere, but ray tracing's even weirder than that because it only applies to car reflections of itself. Say, for example, you can see the reflection of the wing mirror or the rear wing in the paint job of your car. That will be ray traced, but the world around you won't be. It's a bit of a weird system, but I just wanted to address that right at the start. Meanwhile, the Xbox is my Xbox Series X that I record a bunch of my videos with. It's running 4K 60 FPS with performance mode. Again, side note, I play in performance mode and I recommend you play in performance mode as well so you can get a perfectly stable 60 FPS pretty much regardless of what you're doing or where you're going. Meanwhile, my PlayStation is a PS5. I actually don't have a PS5 Pro, so I'm just using the PS5 that I have. It's, again, also the one that's more common out there in the world, and it's also running performance mode. The last thing I'm going to say is every single setting for the Xbox and the PlayStation is as they came out of the box. I reset them all to default. For 99% of the options, they're exactly the same. Except for one. The PlayStation 5 comes with a standard long motion blur, and the Xbox, for some reason, is on short. I have absolutely no idea why that's the case, but it is, and it's a little bit strange, but I thought I would mention it here at the start of this video, because you will notice some differences in the blurring, but we'll get to that in a second. I've got to assume, in theory, you could match every single setting on the Xbox and the PlayStation so they would look exactly the same. But I wanted to play the way the vast majority of people would by just putting the game on and starting to play. And this is what I got. So with all of that out of the way, which one looks the best? If you ask me, it's gotta be the PC. It looks fantastic. It's unbelievably sharp. If I pause all three of the gameplays right here, look into the distance and just look at like the mountains in the distance and The small little details on the back of the car, the way the rear wing attaches to the hatch on this BMW. The PC looks the sharpest by far. I don't know how well it'll come across on YouTube after YouTube like compresses the video and everything like that, but the PC, without a doubt, looks the best. What about the Xbox and the PS5 though? Well, if you ask me, they honestly look very, very similar, if not identical. The colors are probably the biggest difference though. It seems like the PlayStation and the PC, depending on where you are in the world and what you're doing, almost seems like they have a little bit more contrast and like almost vivid colors in a sense, which I found quite strange considering the settings should be identical. As for the actual graphics themselves though, differences between the Xbox and the PC, I'm gonna say there's hardly none, if none at all. All of the models are exactly the same. All of the graphics and everything in the distance seems to be pretty much the same. The only true graphics-based difference is the motion difference that I mentioned earlier, and I've got to assume that's just down to the setting. Again, it's only really one of those things that when you put them side by side and you pause them at exactly the same point, that's when you go, oh, I guess there's a bit of a difference there, but it's nothing major. What about the loading times, though? Those have got to differ a whole bunch between these three, right? Wrong. Again, they are almost identical in the loading times, which is actually really surprising considering the kind of differences built into this test here. This is actually the most surprising thing I noticed when I put all this footage side by side. The loading time was almost identical between all three platforms. I tried to do as much real-world testing as I could do, kind of fast traveling from one side of the map to the other, loading into races, loading into showcases, and I kind of got similar-ish results. The PC loaded fastest into Rivals, for example, followed by the PS5, finally the Xbox. But when I tried to load into a showcase, the Xbox loaded the fastest, followed by the PS5, and then the PC, which kind of surprised me. I don't know about you guys, but I was actually really, really surprised by these results. And not only in the fact that they were similar, but how similar they were. One of the only areas where you'll actually notice a big difference in how long it actually takes to get into the gameplay is when you start the games up from being completely shut down. The Xbox and the PC will get you into the game significantly faster than the PS5 version, but that's only because the PS5 version has a new intro from Panic Button, who actually developed this port for the PlayStation 5. And without that, again, they're fairly similar. What about the weird stuff, though? There's gotta be some weird differences between these three versions, right? Right, there are some weird differences. In my testing, the PS5 version of the game has had some weird sound stuff. When I spin the camera around in the PS5 version, the sound will kind of cut in and be louder at the back of the car than it is at the front of the car. Take a listen. I've got to assume the game is trying to do something with like a surround sound or something, but I tried to go in and mess around with every setting in FH5 and on the PlayStation itself to try to get it to not do that, and I wasn't able to change any of the results. I don't know if it's a weird glitch because this is currently early access that's going to be fixed later on, but I thought I would mention it in this video. While I was doing this showcase event, I had the game go slow-mo on me on the PC and the PS5, but it didn't go slow-mo on the Xbox for some reason, which was a little strange. The only other weird thing I noticed, which wasn't really weird at all, is the PS5. Obviously, I'm using the PS5 controller, which has the adaptive triggers, and in Forza Horizon 5, that equates to the brake actually feeling heavier than the gas pedal, which is a really, really cool sensation. If you're somebody who turns ABS off, it's a really cool sensation when you start to lock up your brakes and you can kind of feel the controller almost pushing against you in a sense. Really cool. So in conclusion, which version of Forza Horizon 5 is the best? It's the PC version, but you knew that already. Duh. When it comes to the Xbox and the PlayStation 5, though, they're basically exactly the same. They're actually so similar, I considered not even making this video because I was like, am I gonna have anything to talk about? And I'll be honest, I kind of spent this whole video going, wow, they look exactly the same. I thought it might be something that people actually want to see with all three versions side by side. I've actually seen people say similar things for other Xbox ports onto the PS5. I've seen things recently with Indiana Jones when that made its debut on the PS5. people said the game is basically the same on the Xbox and the PS5. And for Forza Horizon 5, I think it's even closer than that. Maybe you can argue the colors are a little bit different in certain areas, the contrast is a little bit different, but your TV or your monitor that you're playing on will change all of that for you anyway. All this to say, play whichever version of the game you want. They're basically all the same, and I look forward to seeing you online. I hope this video helps. Okay, bye.